I'll call the budget meeting to order and ask for approval of our last meeting, which was back in February, I believe. Approval of the minutes, moved by Supervisor Simpson, seconded by Supervisor Montesi. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. The purpose of this meeting today is to take a look at our 5-year, multi-year plan from 2018 to 2017, going into 18 through 2021. And on page 1, we have the various funds: the general fund, county road, road machinery, debt service, and then your totals at the bottom. Revenues and expenditures. Some of those are broke down by fund in the back part of your packet there. I have on page 2 is general fund revenues. Page 3 would be general fund expenditures. And I believe it goes on to county road. Well, you got general fund surplus, deficit, reserves, and impact. And then it goes on to the road fund and on to the machinery fund. So as you can see, when you get out to 2021, our estimated unreserved fund balance drops to we'll call it 1.4 million. Which is probably not where we want to be, I think. Each year has an increase of 1.5% in sales tax revenue figured in. Also a 1.5% property tax increase. And whatever the union budgets call for is included in there. I believe there's also a 4% increase in health insurance that's in these figures. Let's see, what else? And OC taxes increases by about 100,000 each year is our projection. And I believe also there's some allowances for retirement. There was a decrease one year and then an increase in other years.
Frank?
Yes.
When our surplus goes down to $1,491,000 in 2021, our sales tax looks like it's still growing, and our revenue looks like it's still growing. Where are we putting that $19 million surplus that we had? I mean, it went from 19, 15, 11, 6. Are we paying off some debt with that?
No.
Into your operating budget.
Right.
The way the model is, you have to understand how the model's comprised. What it does is that anything beyond the assumptions that are made within the model,
Yep.
on either expenditure or revenue, when it goes into an imbalance, it brings it back into balance by using the fund, by reducing the fund balance.
Right.
So it's not assuming any actions that may or may not take place on either the expenditure front or the revenue front. It's just making assumptions like on the Joanne, you can jump in here, but like, for example, on the revenue front, it's making a certain assumption about growth of revenue.
Right.
And expenditures is making an equal number of assumptions. I assume, for example, probably based upon the tax cap and what we've done historically on the expenditure
Right.
side.
Right. And what we project going forward, yeah.
So, what it's showing is that without any action on the part of the board, this is what the result would be. I assume over that 4 or 5 year period, there would need to be some actions on the part of the board because we couldn't operate with a fund balance that was, in fact, I think that statutorily we're at what level now, Mike?
10.
We're at 10. So I don't think we would.
Well, it's just with 6.4 million, I'm gonna have to be borrowing a little bit of money to make the monthly payments on whatever payroll or whatever.
Right.
Keep our monthly cash flow. I need about right around $9.5 million a month on hand for cash flow, depending on what time of year it is. Sometimes of the year it's a little bit less, but like January, February, March, I need 10 or 12 million.
So the scenario is that if you don't cut expenses, you plan to stay below the tax cap, you'll have no option but to use your fund balance, and then you can only really use your fund balance to, at least at the moment, to 10 million. And probably, truth be known, it's probably gets dicey at a couple of million and above that even, 12, 15 million. So.
Well, I think that the big thing, I'm not sure Frank you can answer the question, but we're using some of the fund balance every year to stay under the cap.
Yep.
And I don't know how much that,
We used $978,412 of general fund surplus for this year.
Going forward, that figure will probably increase if
Right.
nothing changes.
Right.
In the last few years, Ron,
Right.
sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Good.
See, what's happened in the last few years is that the operating condition has been, you've had more revenue than expense, so you drop. What happens at the end of the year is that $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 drops to your fund balance, so the effective reduction of your fund balance is nominal. Let me put it that way, maybe $200,000-$300,000, maybe not even that, because you're dropping. I don't know. Last year, do you have the numbers on last year? How much did we return?
I can't remember, but it was about $1 million and something.
And in total, it looks like we ended 2016 at a positive of 3.7 million.
3.7.
3.7.
That's
So if
all
you're
funds.
using, the point is, if you're using $900 or $1 million out of your fund balance, your fund balance is still growing by a couple $1 million, right? And that's how I think you need to judge the use of your fund balance. If you're not returning at the end of the year what you're using in your fund balance, then you're in a decline on your fund balance. And that's what I think it shows here in, was it 17, 18? You see how those numbers flip on revenues and expenditures? You see how it goes from 16, 132 to revenue to 129. I'm talking the top line now. And then you can see what happens in 2017 and on.
Well, if you look at page 4, what is page 4 saying? I mean, it looks like we're going in 17 from 27 million, 24, 20, 15 to 10 million in 221 for surplus, right?
Right.
Why is that different from the front page?
The front page is all funds. You're probably looking at the total funds on the bottom, towards the bottom. Is that what you're looking at? The fund balances?
See, some of those fund balances that you're seeing there, Ron?
Yep.
They are not part of the unencumbered fund balance for the general, for like occupancy tax, capital.
Okay.
capital, that's, that's the money we've got set aside to take care of insurance. Occupancy tax obviously doesn't get involved in that. The Westmount, I mean, that's part of the capital reserve that the board set aside, that 14-something million. So those figures, I mean, that's money that's on hand, but it's set aside in certain areas that can't be considered part of the unencumbered fund balance generally.
Yeah, page 4 is all fund balances, like the treasurer was saying, includes occupancy, the Westmount Reserve. And page 1, I don't believe, has that.
If you look at page 1 on line 32, that number equals page 4, line 21. Those two equal.
So line 32 is equal to what I'm looking at on page 4?
Yes, on line 21, that's your unreserved fund balance.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, I guess the point I'm making is that you said you need $10 million and it looks like on 2021, there is $10 million now. It's in.
But I can't use it.
You can't use it,
I
okay.
can't use all of that money because it's in other funds.
Right, it's in,
a-
yeah,
it's a
specific reserve,
for
yes,
funds that I
okay.
can't use. They're designated for certain things, like the occupancy tax and West.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. My focus on this budget is the debt. You know, we took on this debt with the court, and we need to generate or use our revenue to start paying for it, because we can't keep taking it out of fund balance, or we're just going to run out of money. Yes, Matt.
Does this take into consideration any debt that's coming off over the years? It does? Any of the
Does it?
debt load?
Does?
Yep.
Because we
I know
had-
there's a lot of county road debt that's coming off in 17 or 18.
We had quite a bit come off last year and this year. We made the final payments on several vans, which were the smaller short-term.
Yeah,
loans.
2017 was the final payment.
Yeah, so all of our vans that we have done are paid off, so now we're just looking at major bonds, which is important. And hence then sheriff's complex, human services.
So what would you say, what, just briefly, the jail is how much a year?
I don't have to figure
Oh.
it out.
It's on page 8 is all of our debt.
Oh, okay.
No, it's fine.
Well, I did, as far as debt goes,
I have this one.
We did get approval today. Part of the court proceeding is that we could get 25% of our interest basically paid back to us from the court system. I got approval yesterday in email that we will be getting that for the additional bonding that we did. So we will be getting the 25% back on our interest for just the bond for the court. The end stem is not obviously part of that, but. So that
Good,
helps a little.
yeah.
So
Still
basically,
have to make the principal payments, and that's the big thing.
so we haven't really bonded the court yet, I mean.
Yes.
we're-
Oh, yeah, it's all done, but we set it up so that the first payment for the second big part of that isn't until 2018.
Okay. And how much is that? What's that number that we got on?
It should be.
Frank is-
1.1. 1.1.
Okay.
Yep.
But the net effect to the budget was, because the stuff that was coming off was
900 and something, I believe.
Yep.
So that's your first priority, Frank?
Yep.
Figuring out
Yeah,
how we're
and
gonna...
you know, the contracted pay raises and those two things really. Because there's not really any more money to do anything else, so that's. But whether whether I can account for all this debt this year, it's probably doubtful, but we do have to make a stab at it here.
So, I just want to get this clear in my mind. The state's going to give us 25% of the interest on the courthouse,
Yes.
okay, and that equates to, correct me if I'm wrong, we spent 16 million, we bonded out 16 million, 20 million with the interest, is that correct? Okay, so they're gonna pay us 25% of $4 million, which is approximately $1 million back, is that
Over the course of the bond.
over the course of the bond?
Right, so in other words, every year that we make a principal and interest payment, we can get a rebate back from them for 25% of the interest.
Okay, so we're still on the hook for, that's approximately, so we're still on the hook for $3 million in interest out of the 4 and the $16 million principal, is that correct?
16 and a half.
16. That's all
Plus,
county, that's all us.
plus the 5.7 that we borrowed for the NSTEM.
Yeah, I'm just talking about that right now, but yes, the M-STEM is a whole other can of worms, but, okay, right, that's where our decision to make it into the Taj Mahal comes back to bite us, and that's my 2 cents. All right, thank you.
So, and, you know, this year we've also spent, $275,000 on radios, $577,000 on the roads. This is money right directly out of the fund balance, and we also appropriated, $300,000 for the Horkin Avenue sewer extension. So, you know, that's money right out of the cookie jar, you know, try to piggy bank, however you want to look at it. Not that there's anything, you know, I'm not saying that that's bad, but it's money that we've spent. And the comptroller has set the inflation rate at 1.84%. A rough calculation on our on what we levied for this year means, you know, between $700,000 and $750,000 if we go to the 1.84. Sales tax, you know, that's, like I say, there's 1.5% is built into the figures that you're looking at. You know, that's anybody's guess as far as I'm
Well, I
concerned.
think, Frank, I want to applaud you for this year, putting that at zero increase over last year, because for a couple of years there, we were falling a little short.
Yeah.
And this will get us back plus side.
Right.
That, because we anticipate we will actually collect more than we did last year, so that's
Yep.
gonna help us going forward, because then once you get back so that we're actually showing a little extra there, then you can start putting that percentage back in.
Right, right. Yeah, a couple of years we were quite short, actually. So,
When you say we were quite short, you mean what we estimated and what
Right.
we actually received?
what we budgeted and what we received was about $500,000 short for 2 years.
I mean, generally, that's it's not, I don't mean it as a game, but that's the process where you try to underestimate what you think you're going to get, so you do end up with a surplus.
Right. Well, we looked at sales tax historically, and it was, you know, 2% or better.
Yeah.
So we figured 2%, and it wasn't.
Right.
Yes,
You know,
Mr. Conover.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what it's showing is that the historical development projection of our existing operating condition exceeds our revenue streams. In other words, if you put 1.5% on the sales tax and you assume whatever you assume on the other revenue streams, the expenditure stream goes right past it and just keeps on going, because you just don't have, it's not sustainable. That's the point. I mean, just for example, every 1% of negotiated contractual increases is $500,000? I don't know, what's paid?
Yeah, probably about that.
$500,000? So if you give 2% or 2.5%, you got to find $1 million more, just right there. If the healthcare costs come back at 8% on 13, 12, 11, 12, 13 million, depending on how you want to calculate healthcare,
Oh, man.
there's another $1 million. But just payroll, healthcare alone demands over $2 million more each and every year before you even get to petroleum,
New roads.
gasoline, diesel, equipment, you know, before we even get to anything else. And that's, so basically what we have is not sustainable going forward. That's what the numbers are showing you. It's not sustainable going forward. So yeah, the last thing you want to do is overstate your sales tax. I can tell you from experience that when if the bottom goes out of sales tax and you're caught too high, that's a bad trip down, believe me.
Well, that's what started the 2008, 2009 problems.
Right.
So that's what it's showing, is that that this amount of budget to sustain it going forward, you know, if we're going to stay below the tax cap, and I think everybody wants to stay below the tax cap, why wouldn't we want to stay below the tax cap if we can? But what it shows is you don't go to your fund balance and you have to cut expenses. You just don't have a choice. If you're going to do that, better you do it early than later, because you'll get more benefit from it doing it earlier than later.
Mr. Montesi.
Frank, what did you say we used to stay below the tax cap? Tax cap. 900,000.
The general.
Yep,
Yeah,
almost
there's
almost
another
$1 million.
$1 million.
Well, that was just general fund.
Yeah.
We also used 970 in county road and 511,000 in road machinery.
If you look at the borrowing is really very small. The borrowing to our tax base is one of the lowest in the state. But you also have to look at the borrowing to our operating condition. You have to look at the borrowing, especially new borrowing, to what cash you have for the borrowing. So that gets added in as well. So if Mike needs an additional $650,000, I bet I'm pretty close with that, relative new dollars relative to the borrowing. That would go on top of the personnel, it would go on top of the health care, it would go on top of everything else. And even if, you know, but even if that had been reduced by $200,000, not that that wouldn't have been a good thing, but even if that had been reduced by $200,000, it doesn't change that projection. Dealing with much bigger numbers to move this projection.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Beatty.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it looks like a pretty gloomy picture, you know, long term here. And not even long term, like 3-4 years is not long term. And we're probably gonna have to this board's probably gonna have to start making some tougher decisions. Raise taxes, which I would definitely be against, to get additional revenue. Cut expenses. And where are we going to be able to cut expenses? The board did a great job in 2009, I think, in 10 of paring back. Maybe we made some decisions that weren't as solid as what the board thought they were in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14. Just from me looking at this overall picture, there's a few low-hanging fruit that I see. We had an airport meeting this morning, looking at going to an RFP for someone to lease the airport. To me, is one of those low-hanging pieces of fruit. Because I can see us getting an additional $500,000 to $600,000 a year in the county by having someone else lease the airport. Now, I know there's a lot of still moving parts with that, but that's just a peripheral view of that. The other thing is the runway extension. And I know we all hear about, oh, it's all free money. It's, you know, it's federal, it's state, 90% federal, 5% state. I think they're cutting me off. But that 5% of approximately $10 million is still $500,000 with a lot of additional costs every year occurred. So to me, some of the low-hanging fruit is right there. Now, does that solve our problems? Heck no. And we're gonna have to make other tough calls. But, I don't like what I see here. This scares me to death when I look at these type of projections and numbers. This is a suicide mission right now. Now, we need to start thinking right now. We said, hey, let's spend $20 million on a new courthouse expansion. I know by law we had to put one in of 5,100 square feet. We put in 23,000 square feet, or 21,000. I know that. We were told you gotta buy a Volkswagen. We said, no, we'd rather have a Bentley. So shame on us. We did the MSTEM project, of which I was a supporter and still am. Because to me, keeping people in this county to our largest employer, which is healthcare, makes sense to me. Because I'm not a spender, but that one made sense to me. Because I think we'll get our return and our money back to our people staying in our county and in a growing field. So I'm curious to see what our budget chairman has for suggestions and our treasurer has, or anybody else has for suggestions on how to fix this really scary scenario to me. This is a real situation that we need all the supervisors on board with been saying, hey, we got some real problems down the road here. This isn't just, one day a meeting here, 20 people are sitting here, and, this is a super, super big problem. And we just need to start looking at it and start having discussions on what type of tough decisions we're gonna need to be making. Because I don't think the county residents are gonna say, hey, let's increase the county tax rate 3%. I don't think they're gonna go for that. By law, we can go 1.8 under the tax cap rule, I understand that. If we try to go 2% or higher than that, they're gonna rebel, and they probably should rebel. They're saying, you guys aren't doing enough to take care of your business. Your business is our money, so do a better job. So, I'm glad we're having this meeting today. I think this is a super eye-opener for me, that we've got to start addressing these situations very clearly. We've overspent. Bottom line is, my opinion, we spent way too much for the resources we had. That's how I see it. So now what are we going to do? We've done it, but now what are we going to do to try to alleviate and fix this problem? Thank you.
Mr. Montesi.
Frank, in the, on page 4, it says reserve fund balance for Westmount, and it looks like there's $4 million in there. Are we spending down on any of that? Or a little bit?
A little bit. There's,
I mean, that's a legacy cost that
yeah,
we,
right, well,
Yep.
we spend any money on the software thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we spend a little there, and it's about 300 and, I'm going off memory.
365, something like.
Thousand.
Yep.
For this year, I think we're gonna be drawing out of that for some legacy costs, and that will continue to go forward.
And this
Health
shows how
insurance.
it goes down.
Oh, health insurance, okay.
Retiree.
Will we end up with something left, do you think?
Well, the problem is that we don't actually have all of that 4.3 million cash in here. Some of that was, the money in there is the sale money, okay, which is 2.3 or 4, whatever that was. But a lot of that is accruals that have come over from Westmount that we haven't collected yet, like the IT money still coming in, I think, and, Stevie's got the rehabs.
But I mean, it's not a matter of management, I mean, it's a matter of what happens with the legacy costs, but we should have maybe, at some point, there may be a couple of $1 million left there.
Yeah, but
That's always a possibility, but that's gonna be...
that could be 10, right.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask, what was the time frame?
Yeah, 15 to 20 years down the road.
Right.
Okay.
But at least we have the fund. It's a reserve of receivables that we haven't received all of it yet.
Okay.
Yes. Mr. Conover.
Yeah, it's important to keep in mind, this fund balance didn't happen overnight. You have to understand what creates a fund balance. What creates a fund balance is that each year, you're not spending all of your revenue, so it drops your fund balance. And so, what's happened since 2010, I think I'm about right. Since 2010, made some tough decisions in 8 and 9. What we've been doing is funds have been dropping to our fund balance, and there have been other, I call them project things, but other things that have also fed into it. And that's what has created the fund balance over all of these years, up to this point in time. And up into and including this last year, we have dropped out of our operating condition some amount of money to our fund balance. So our fund balance become larger, right? What the projection does, and the beauty of the projection and the strength of the projection for decision making, is what it shows is going forward, the historical trend is that the expenses now over all of these years, right, go past your revenue source. We will at some point not be able to drop to our fund balance what we're using out of our fund balance. So if we're using $900,000 to balance the budget, so to speak, to keep taxes down, at some point your operating condition will not drop that to your fund balance. So you will use $900,000 out of your fund balance in that year, and if you can't find revenue for it the next year, you'll use it the next year. You start spending $1 million a year out of your fund balance. So you'll deplete but just on that alone, you'll deplete your fund balance. So to this point in time, I think it shows, a prudent financial picture, and I think actually a pretty strong financial picture, I would say, on a comparable basis statewide. We just had our bond rating increase to AA+. They don't do that unless we have a strong financial condition, which we do. That said, unattended going forward, we will eventually, soon now, get to a different place from a revenue expense point of view. But we need to think about how exactly we're going to address that. That's the challenge.
It's
Mr.
a
Simpson.
trend. It's a trend moving forward. If we continue down the same path, is where it's going to be.
Right.
Not that that's where we're going to be.
Well, for example, if you assume 1.5% on the sales tax, and you do better than 1.5%, then that's a good thing, right? Say you did 0.25% or 0.5% more. That's a pretty big number. That's not a small number. That's on 50 million, of which we keep half. So that's not a small number. But the way I think correctly we're doing it is, rather than saying, hey, next year we're going to do 2 or 2.5%, we're much more conservative than that. We're saying we'll do 1.5%, and if we do 2%, great, but that's not part of our budget. That we have going forward, but it's not part of our budget. Because what happens is, if you project that in your budget, it becomes part of your structural operating condition, and then each and every year you have to find that money or some other revenue stream to replace it.
Mr. McDonald.
Mr. Chairman, has there been any discussion about possibilities of what sharing services can do, a few years down the road? I know we have that workshop next Friday, I believe,
Right.
but has there been any preliminary discussions yet about what departments could benefit from sharing services with towns, perhaps? Maybe another
Not
conference?
really, no. No. We hope to get to that, See what ideas comes out of next Friday's meeting. Not this coming, but the week after. Yes, Ms. Bramer.
Thank you. I know that it looks bad, what you just said about the trend. I mean, what is the overall plan for reversing that trend or finding money where we can't just rely on sales tax. That's not something we can control. What are the things that we can control that we're starting to look at in order to reverse the trend?
Personnel.
And we can't do anything about our debt. That's something we've already committed to doing, this Cadillac court project. So personnel is the...
Personnel. We've added 5 new positions this year, plus 2 part-time positions, so, the bottom line is personnel is our largest cost, and that's the most expensive part of this operation, for the most part. I mean, there's a couple other exceptions, but, you know, yes.
And the most significant thing was voted on in committee today. I'm not sure it went to the board yet or not, by moving to self-insurance. So
Right.
what happens there is that once we get past the payout period for Blue Cross, and actually even before the payout period, there is a significant savings on the expense side to moving to self-insurance. And now we're being careful with that because of the amount that we've set for the secondary insurance, if you will. It was set at 100,000, was it? At 100,000, so naturally you don't gain as much savings there as you would if, let's say, it was set at 200,000. But I think the thinking was, I think appropriately, let's get a year or so under our belt so we feel comfortable, and then if we need to tick it up to 1.5 or whatever we need to do, we can do that at that time. But just to give you an idea, that savings is against you know, a county bill of into the many millions of dollars. So those are the kinds of things that have and the thing about that savings is each and every year. It's not that's not a one-time occurrence. If you reduce your operating expense and insurance by, say, $500,000, then you've reduced that expense in all the budgets going forward.
Yes, Ms. Bramer.
They did tell us to be very cautious with that. They can't project out
Right.
past year one that we really will save that much money, because we could have employees who have huge medical expenses, so.
That's true.
I
but-
see what you're saying, that hopefully that trend will help us in the other direction.
Right, but the point is that affirmative move, and the other thing too is that to remember that also there's not just savings in terms of what you're paying today, but the cost avoidance going forward.
Cost of what?
Cost avoidance, in other words, that it's not just against what you're paying today and so that you're paying less. You also have the situation where in future years you could be paying more, right, if you stayed there, and so you've avoided that increase, is my point. So that's that's no small item. The other thing I think is the way we've handled the fund balance through not bringing it into our operating condition, but doing these one and done kind of projects, so that if we have to retreat or we have to pull back, we can. I think that's been key as well, as opposed to using the fund balance in your operating condition where you have to use it each and every year. So if, like, next year you feel we can't put $500,000 more into roads, well, you don't need to. But the amount that we would normally have budgeted would be there. If we find ourselves in a position to be able to do that, well, then we'll reach out and be able to do that. Those kinds of decisions make a big difference in a budget.
Mr. Montesi.
I know I'm not picking on criminal justice or the sheriff's department or the corrections, but I think they're short 11 people. That was the last comment, and you know, you'd think there would be a savings there, but the problem is that because they're mandated to make the coverage, we have to pay time and a half. So we're probably we had to expend another $300,000 into that budget. So that's somewhat of a killer too, and that's, I guess, what you'd call a state mandate that we're dealing with.
Well, yeah, because we absorbed probably 1.3 or 4 million when we added correction officers here 2 or 3 years ago.
Right.
So we're just kind of getting even with that in the budget, in my opinion. You know, that runs into these numbers too. I mean, because that was 1.34 million we had to come up with, and we come up with every year. So it's you know, it takes time to absorb these, like the debt. Any major change, it takes time if you're going to continue providing that service or increasing the service, which is what we're doing at the jail. We're increasing service, in my opinion. Yes, Mr. McDonald.
I think it's worthwhile to discuss how to manage expenses. Yeah, I'm not a town supervisor, I do a ward supervisor, but I do discuss a lot with my counterpart, the kind of city council. And some of the things we talk about with the city budget is, you know, it's just, it is very tiring and it becomes very, very stressful year in and year out, just trying to manage expenses without any new revenues. Something that we could talk about here, and I want to talk about with you, but I haven't had a chance to, is when it comes to tourism, building those shoulder seasons. That's something we talked about at the most recent tourism committee meeting, and maybe the only way at this point to do is to bring in or allocate more OCTAX resources to going after conventions and those kind of trade shows and so on during the winter months, boost the revenue there. That's at the end of the fall too. I think that's a way to generate some sales tax revenue. Again, it's not something that you can bank on every year, but you know, if we start that for next year, then maybe it will bear fruit in 3-4 years from now to have something more sustained, something you can, you know, kind of depend on a little bit more, even if it's a half percent on top of what this January's sales tax revenue was. That's still something.
Right, I agree.
I don't know if that's something we want to talk about.
Well, can I
Just
make
Mr. Merlino.
comment? You know, sales tax has been increasing roughly $100 million a year for the last 7 years. I got it right here. But that's only the lousy 3% we get from the state. The state takes, so when you're saying our sales tax goes up 1% or 1.5%, it's really going up about 4.5%. Because the state takes the other 4%. It's a big number, so it's tough to keep. People always just have in mind, well, it's only 1.5% it went up. But it really went up 4.5% because the state takes 4% of the increase. You know, people don't really realize. I didn't even realize until I got into this how much and everything else. But the two comments I'll make is shared services. It's not a messiah. It's not a great thing. I just asked Jeff Tennyson, shared services. I have my road grass cutter broke down. Can't get it fixed right now. My road superintendent wants at least one for a month for $4,000, maybe $5,000. Ask Jeff, shared service, he got one hanging around. He's using it at the same time I need it. You know, trucks for snow plowing. You know, if my truck breaks down, I call these guys, can I borrow? Well, they're using their truck. So a lot of shared services and big stuff that's needed, it doesn't fit. And back to my thing, I know Mr. Beatty in the airport, and I'm almost leaning towards Mr. Beatty. I hate to say that, but
I write that down.
but there's also something that's not in this big sheet of paper here, is that we get roughly $25 million, it's been averaging, and half of that goes to the county budget, half of that gets shared with the town. But the county budget portion also loses, and they're going to lose almost $600,000 this year going to that sewer project, which is one of the worst deals supervisors made in 2002. And with the county portion of sales tax is going to Glens Falls for sewage that's leaving Queensbury. I know nobody wants to hear it, but if the people that are using that sewage in Queensbury paid a little of that money, that $500,600,000 would be here put in our regular budget. It wasn't fixed, it wasn't, see, the problem is when they did that, it wasn't fixed. It started off at $300,000 and it went up by the amount of money we got in. It's a percentage rather than a fixed number. So, you know, that's just something, I know I don't want to battle it, but you know, there's another $500,000 to $600,000 we're losing every year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I respect what you're saying, Jeff, but I also want to reiterate the fact that money that goes to the city because of that's in proportion to how well the county does. Otherwise, the city wouldn't get any of that because of the way the sales tax distribution is different between county and city. So the better the county does, the more we'll go.
That's not my point. That's not my point.
That's the nature of that relationship.
That's not my point.
That's the nature of that agreement.
My point is the people in Lake Luzerne and Horicon and everybody else is paying part of that money because we're not getting it back into our revenue.
It's generating.
My point is, I'm not arguing. My point is the people in Queensbury should be paying it. That's my point. Not that you're not supposed to get it. My point is that should be added to the people that are using the sewage in the area that it's being made. All the business people there should be paying their percentage to it. That's my point. Not that you shouldn't get it. because we need your assistance over there for that surge. But my point is, it's not equally shared. It's shared by all the county taxpayers to send that money there than just the Queensbury people that are using it. That's my point. So I'm not arguing the point that you don't need it. I'm arguing the point that it's coming from the wrong revenue.
Mr. Conover.
And it's not in here.
Yeah, the kind of thing that I think would bear to go to Claudia's question beyond significant items like healthcare, that's a significant item. There's no doubt about that. That's again, some of the initial numbers were $800,000 or $900,000 a year. Once you pay off Blue Cross Blue Shield, you could be.
Is that in here? Is that factored in here, Joe?
That would be under
What's-
the expense side, I doubt it.
Yeah, what's in here is a 4% increase.
4%.
That's what was calculated
So-
for each year.
But
Well, we don't actually increase by 4%.
where you might have an opportunity going forward, and this wouldn't have to happen every year, you could do this over the next 3 or 4 years. You wouldn't want to go to the extreme on this, but the operating budget has continually some number of unfilled positions, right? They're funded, which means they're part of the tax levy, but they're unfilled. So when we go through the budget process this time, Frank and I have been talking, every one of those unfilled positions, we need to evaluate that. Because it may be, that's like a two-edged sword, if you see what I'm saying. On the one hand, you do have to have positions that have to be unfilled for a particular moment in time. You need to have a funded, so the department can be at full complement. On the other hand, there may be unfilled positions that can remain part of the organizational structure but unfunded, where they then come to us to request that funding for those positions. Now, that sounds easy enough to do, but the
15
other
million
part,
healthcare.
the problem with that is that those unfunded, or those funded, unfilled positions, whatever their number is at on average, is, I guess you could say, what's left of the flexibility of the budget, if you kind of see what I'm saying. In other words, that eliminate all that, and you could find yourselves in a real pickle. But I think there's some opportunity there to go into that budget, to look at those unfilled but funded positions, and make an evaluation as to whether these are positions that we either delete from the organizational structure, or we leave in the organizational structure but unfund. In other words, that we decide you've got to come in and make an argument for this position. We're not going to take it from you organizationally, but we're not sure that we want to fund it either at this moment in time. Because all of those unfunded positions, whatever that number might be, that's all part of your budget, which is part of your levy. That would be another area of
Yep, sure is.
another area to look at, and again, you wouldn't need to like go in and with a meat cleaver in year one. It might be, there might be 2 or 3 this year, 2 or 3 next year, a couple the following year, and then over the course of 3 or 4 years, maybe there's 6 or 7 positions that are no longer part of your organizational structure. You found more efficient ways to do it. Maybe you privatize. Maybe the department figures out a better way to do it. But then you cut your organizational structure down by enough over a period of time to make a difference on these projections.
What would you guess, Frank, that those unfunded positions, I mean, how many, we talking 100 maybe in the county?
No, there's not that many.
Oh, okay, so it's
Maybe 20,
20? Okay.
25.
I did have a question for you on page 3. When we look at employee benefit fringes, when we get to 218, it's a minus figure. What does that mean?
Yes, you may.
Are you looking at?
I'm looking at-
line 25, right?
Yeah, line 25.
What those figures represent are our last union contract made certain assumptions for new employees where they would pay a higher rate for their health insurance, and also they're in Tier 6 for retirement rather than Tier 4. And those are assumptions on a certain number of people that we will be retiring at the Tier 4, coming in at Tier 6, and retiring at, say, a 13% health insurance contribution to a 20, and the new person will pay 20%. So that was a calculation that I did, and
Okay.
that's where I put it.
That's
So-
how it got to be a
Because we don't have a
negative.
specific department, I couldn't put it in a
Thank
specific
you.
department.
Mr. Simpson?
Mr. Conover, on the unfunded positions, or the positions that you would, that money would generally just return back to the fund balance to begin with, so it's one piece, but it's a very, limited effect.
Right,
Because you're still not growing your,
That's correct.
you're not lowering your operating expense truly,
That's correct.
because it's automatically lowered and equaled out at the end of the year.
You're taking those efficiencies, and if you want to call it that, you're taking those efficiencies and you're moving that resource into the growth. So you're reducing it here, but the saved dollars is just going back over here to pay for increased energy, increased whatever, as opposed to going somewhere else.
And I think we also have to remember that, Warren County is one of 3 counties, Warren, Washington, and Saratoga, that the sales tax is at 7% out of 52 counties in the state. Most of them are 8, and some are beyond that. So, I think that being able to manage our operation here at 7% sales tax, I think, that speaks pretty well of everyone here, in my opinion.
And that number is large.
Yeah.
1%.
Yep. So, yes.
Hey, Frank, if we were to raise, other counties have raised that sales tax from 6 to 7, 7 to 8.
Right.
And it'd be, if we were giving some consideration to that, I'm not saying we are at this point, but if we were, it's a big number, but I wonder what happened in those counties when they did raise that, if they, if it slowed the economy down, or did they really get more dollars out of it? I think that would be something that we would want to
See what the effect.
take a look at, what the effect was, and then
Yep.
eventually I think we're going to have to make that kind of a tough decision.
Yeah, I think, I'm not advocating to do it, but I think down the road, I think some board is gonna have to do it, because, you can't keep, mandating that we, provide lawyers for everybody, and, a prison guard for every inmate, and, take care of their health, and, and the health, you just can't keep doing that stuff, and, expect the property taxpayer to pay for it, it's, that's driving our costs too, that's...
Let's not forget, on the horizon, you have the underage incarceration that's
Right,
out there.
right.
That has to be brought in by what date on that?
Phasing in late 18 and 2019.
19? So, and that is an expense that just simply does not appear at all in
Right.
our budget, capital or operating.
That could be that could be a facility, that could be cost to transport juveniles or whatever to that could end up being a big expense.
Right now, I think we have, the sheriff says 4 or 5 a month, but that could change drastically with the amount of drug infiltration in our area, so...
There's going to have to be a lot more discussion amongst counties and also county to state on that entire question. The counties just don't have the money to...
No, the state needs to
Counties just don't have the money.
step up and pay for it.
We did talk to someone in corrections, and we said, what kind of a facility would a county or a group of counties have to build? Would it be a dormitory type of thing, or would it be more like a prison, a correction facility? And they said, we don't know.
Right.
And we don't have any guidance at this point, so,
Mr. McDonald?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to put out there something else for people to consider. I mean, where we talked about it at 1 o'clock, but the potential for an EMS, countywide EMS system, and how much that could potentially cost. Just looking at some of the respondents here, looking at a pretty hefty sum.
Yeah.
And that would be something that's not even included in these projections. So,
Right.
I just wanted to mention that part.
Yep. That's
Frank,
Gene.
you do an excellent job with the budget, and I always say that. Do you have any idea, how far are you into it? Do you have any idea what you think we might need to cut throughout all the departments?
I told the departments to stay, just keep their budgets the same
Same.
level. And I think, I think, as I said before, I don't think we'll take care of all the debt in 1 year, but I think, it's the same as the prison guards, the jail guards. Over a couple of years' time, you work it into the budget, and pay for the pay raises, and the health insurance is definitely going to help us a lot. And the health insurance, by being self-insured, is more manageable. The more effort that the board puts into it, the more management we can keep on that health insurance, and we keep our costs down, in various ways. Whereas before, it was just pay the bill, and,
Except the 4 or 8% increase.
Right.
Oh, we were looking at, towns in the county, we were looking at years of 15 to 20% or more in the premiums. I mean, it was just financially traumatic. I mean, that's a big number. You start talking 12, 14, 15% on 13 million, 12, 13 million dollars. I mean,
Matt?
Are the one and done items that we did included in this budget going forward, or are they out? In other words,
If
the
we only did 'em.
300,000 for countries.
It wouldn't
Oh,
be
no,
in-
that's just showing in 2017, not forward.
Normally, we would wait till probably the earliest, the latter part of this year, maybe early next year, to see where we are. And then sit down with Frank and Mike and whoever, and whichever committee, make a decision that, and I'd like to think that the revenue picture is going to hold, and that we can continue to do more roads. That's my hope. But I'd rather wait until I see the numbers.
Yep. Anything else? Yes, Mr. Beatty?
Yeah, we talked about the sales tax at 7%. The state has to, if we even wanted to do it, which I'd be against, but even if the board said, hey, let's go to 8%, the state has to authorize that.
Correct.
From all indications, from what I've heard from Betty Little and Dan Stack, and the state is not into increasing anyone's sales tax increase. So I think that discussion is dead on arrival. As a county, I don't think we should spend a lot of time on that, but we know the answer is no. And that just takes away. Now,
Well, then how can they extend it on other counties and say Warren County, you can't?
I didn't think they were. Are they doing that, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
they did.
Anything about
They came
that?
back special session to do that.
Oh, okay, well, then maybe they're open up to doing that now. I still be against that increase, but,
Right.
I like what Matt said when he said we're not even funding the EMS, I mean, that's a significant cost that we don't even have in this budget, because we wouldn't have. And let me ask you one other question, broadband. Do we have any budget in here for increased broadband expenses and so forth?
No, I don't believe so.
No? Okay, so that's something else that potentially down the road could be. So, I wrote down just a couple of things from just listening to Mr. Chairman, Mr. Conover, and a few other people. Where we could possibly reduce costs would be self-insurance, okay? That potentially has some real benefits. On the other hand, as Karen said, hey, you could have a year where costs go way up, okay, so that's,
Yep.
but I think overall, that's a potential. The airport's leasing, the airport, extension, shared services, personnel cuts, those are all areas in which we're probably gonna have to look at, all of them, to get us where we need to get. And obviously, with the state mandates and unfunded mandates, there's nothing we can do about that, unfortunately. We can sit here and complain and yell and scream, and I'd be the first one to do that.
Well, that's what we have to do, though. We have to complain.
Yeah, and hopefully someday they'll listen, but the reality is,
Well,
we have to deal with,
probably never will.
right, Frank, we gotta deal with what it is, and
Right.
they're not gonna change their way, they like to force it down to the county level. So, now the expenses I had that are concerning the courthouse, MSTEM, sheriff's office / jail, EMS cost potential, okay, those are all significant expenses that and the fact that, we're limited by the tax cap, basically at 1.8, which is only 700 grand, these all require significantly above 700,000 a year.
Right.
So I say maybe a special board meeting is needed just so we can start getting this discussions going. I don't know, maybe that's too dramatic or too drastic, but I think the sooner the better, that we really start looking at all the avenues. Because 2-3 years from now, it's gonna be honest, and we're gonna start saying, well, geez, how'd we get there? So I think it's not too early to get started, definitely.
Nope. I think that's the purpose of this whole exercise, is to project where we're going, and, it keeps us on the conservative side of things. Yes, Mr. Merlino.
Just, this is my last comment. The only thing with the sales tax, and I know you agree, but last year there was a move, Saratoga County, Washington County, Warren County, to get together, because the three counties together go to the state. They don't have much of an option to turn them all down. So it was put on the side. But there is interest in Saratoga County and Washington County, because they're all having the same problems we're having.
And I saw one report that said how much we benefit from having only 7, and those guys having higher ones, because people are actually buying more in Warren County because of lower sales tax numbers. So that argument, would it help us get more revenue? Totally. On the other hand, it may not, because we may have less people buying in Warren County, because right now it's an advantage in buying. So you can make an argument both ways on that.
Yep.
The advantage is to it.
So,
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
See, on a projection, let's say that the sales tax stays reasonably strong for the next 4 years. We're not projecting that in our projections, but let's just say, for the sake of discussion, that it stays reasonably strong where it is, or thereabouts, or a little more, for the next 4 years. Well, if that's $1.5 million, that's $1.5 million on this projection times 5. So the projection all bumps up $5 million, $6 million, maybe as high as, over the 5-year period, maybe as high as $10 million. So I'm not saying that's going to happen. We should be so lucky. But my point is that you have to keep in mind that these are very conservative, as they should be, conservative projections. And we've done a great job to this point in time, but what the projections clearly are showing is that we can't continue down the path we're going down and expect to be in a good place. That's what it's telling me. That over the next 2 or 3 years, we have to make some, I think we have to make some expenditure decisions. But it hurts, when they come in on legal services and they need, extra attorneys or, whatever else comes down the pike. It's those things. We're still hurting, but from the jail, that was 12 or 13 positions, $1.3 million a year, each and every year. Each and every year. Now, you have to think that if we hadn't spent that money would have fallen to our fund balance, and over the last, it's been 4 years? Over the last 4 years, that would all fall, and our fund balance would be even higher. or we'd have a lot more roads that would have been done. So, but that had to be done, it was done. But it takes a while to catch your wind from something like that on a budget like ours. That's a big expenditure, all of a sudden, just to put $1.3 million in the expenditure column with no significant revenue against it. All expenditure. Okay? But we handled that, and we still built up the fund balance, and we still did okay with the fund balance because the economy was starting around 9 and 10, started chugging along a little bit, and it helped. So just be careful on your projections because anything is times 4, times 5. So the positive side, if you want to envision a positive number, it's a bigger number because it's over that many years.
Okay, anything else from anyone?
Call for adjournment?
Okay, moved by Ron, seconded by Matt. All in favor? Thank you.